Bet you never heard this story about the Titanic. So, this massive luxury ocean liner was heading out of Southampton on its first voyage to New York with over 2,000 passengers and crew on board. I'll spare you the details for now. You know how it all went down. Since there were a lot of things that went wrong during its short lifespan, some couldn't help but wonder, was it really bad luck? Or was there some mysterious force behind the ruckus? Well, for starters, right as it was leaving the harbor, the Titanic nearly crashed into another ship, called the SS New York. How did that happen? Well, 6 tugboats had to pull the massive Titanic into the river to begin its journey. Captain Smith was in charge, but let's be honest, he probably needed a few more cups of coffee before making any big decisions. So, as the Titanic was speeding along, minding her own business, she passed the New York and the Oceanic ships. The Titanic decided to make a left turn, but the suction was just too much for the poor New York. She started to drift off towards the Titanic. The Oceanic was leaning so much, her gangplank smacked into the water like a belly flop in the pool. Thankfully, the captain of one of the tugboats was there to save the day. He used his trusty megaphone to call the Vulcan to the port side of the Titanic to pick up some crew members. He then noticed the New York in trouble and acted quickly, throwing a line to slow her down. The Titanic's captain was probably scratching his head, wondering how to handle these big ships like the Titanic. That's because he'd only recently experienced sailing on larger ships. Close one, right? Well, it was just part of the story. As it turns out, the huge list of misfortunes might have started even earlier. Another theory suggests that during the ship's construction days in Northern Ireland, a fire broke out in the coal bunkers. Talk about a rocky start. If this information is correct, then the ship's hull may have been affected by the incident before it even set sail. Fans of this theory argue that a fire popped up inside one of the Titanic's large coal bunkers and really damaged an important segment of the ship's hull. Some claim there's even photographic evidence to back this up. A bunch of photos documenting how the ship was made and pampered for its maiden voyage were found, and they showed a significant black streak on the outside of the Titanic's hull. Weirdly enough, the streak was really close to where the iceberg hit during that cold April. Now I know what you're thinking. This theory might sound far-fetched, but most of these people have been gathering information about the Titanic for decades, and they're convinced that this is the real deal. They even believe that the fire started way earlier than the day the Titanic set out on its maiden voyage, particularly about 3 weeks prior. Why was this overlooked? Well, because of fear of bad press, mostly. Also, because of all the fuss created around the unsinkable ship, it was important that they stuck to the initial calendar. Of course, not everyone is convinced by this new theory. Some people think it's just another wacky idea to add to the long list of Titanic sensational theories. What if I told you there were even rumors about part of an ancient Egyptian coffin being on board? Could that have had something to do with the disastrous ending of the Titanic? Some truly believe it did. Let me tell you the story about the unlucky mummy. It's a tale that'll give you goosebumps. Back in the 19th century, this ancient Egyptian artifact, a mummy case lid to be exact, was brought over to Europe. And as soon as it arrived, strange things started happening. Now, some of the stories may be a bit exaggerated, but according to journalists, some of them were actually true. The rumors sparked the interest of a British writer who later spent months investigating the mummy case and its alleged related stories. He was planning to write an article debunking the myths, but he found out they were all too real. Unfortunately, he never got to finish his work because he passed away suddenly. Others believed that the mummy case was guarded by Egyptian elementals. They warned others not to mess with the artifact. The mummy case's history is just as spooky. It was found in Egypt and sold to a certain someone conveniently named Mr. W at a party organized by a well-known English lady. When the mummy case arrived in England, it was given to Mr. W's sister, who immediately suffered from financial losses and other troubles. A photographer who took a picture of the case claimed that he captured a living woman's face on the film. The mummy case eventually ended up in the British Museum, and it's still there today. However, rumors say that it was aboard the Titanic and was responsible for its sinking. But don't believe everything you hear. Some sources claim the mummy case never left the British Museum, and the rumor was started by a journalist named William Stead. He was actually a passenger on the Titanic, and he supposedly told his fellow passengers about the ill-fated mummy before the ship went down. Is that what happens when you tempt fate? Seriously doubt it, but it does make you wonder, doesn't it? It gets even weirder, trust me! About 50 passengers got cold feet before the ship took off, and they refused to board the Titanic at the last minute, even if it meant that they'd lose the cost of the ticket. They just had an extremely bad feeling about the whole deal, and even an Irish astrologer warned against making the voyage on the Titanic. I doubt he saw a big ol' iceberg hidden somewhere in the stars, but it does add up to the mystique surrounding the Titanic. And do you know what's even worse? The fact that the ship's binoculars, which could have helped prevent the iceberg collision, were locked up. Apparently, those binoculars could have been used by lookouts on that fateful night. But guess what? The key was held by David Blair, an officer who was sadly bumped from the crew before the ship's departure. Poor guy. He probably didn't even know what he was holding on to. Now, some historians think that if those binoculars were in use, the iceberg might have been spotted earlier. But hey, let's not point fingers here. Others argue that it wouldn't have made a difference. Who knows? Maybe the lookout was too busy looking at the stars to notice a giant iceberg in front of them. But seriously, what were they thinking? Locking up the binoculars on a ship that big is like forgetting to pack sunscreen for a trip to the beach. Also, the ship might have been going a bit too fast. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why was the captain in such a hurry? Well, apparently, good old Captain Smith was trying to beat his ship's older sibling, the Olympic, in a race to see which ship could cross the Atlantic faster. I guess he had a bit of a sibling rivalry going on or something. But here's the thing. Even though there were warnings about icebergs in the area, the Titanic just kept on chugging along at full speed ahead. I mean, come on, guys, it's not rocket science. If you know there are icebergs around, maybe slow down a little bit, right? And then, close to midnight on April 14th, 1912, the Titanic hit that iceberg and sank in the North Atlantic. It also famously had a mere 16 lifeboats and 4 collapsible dinghies on board. No wonder it ended up being one of the worst maritime disasters in modern history. After the whole event, people started believing in life beyond the veil and contacted mediums, hoping for signs from the ones they had lost at sea. Can't say I blame them, though there's no verified story of someone managing to contact a Titanic passenger from the beyond, though.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.